One afternoon, a young woman named Amanda suddenly ran out of her house as if someone was chasing her. Even her father looked confused because nothing unusual had happened before that. Out of nowhere, Amanda completely panicked and sprinted outside. But after stopping in the middle of the road for a moment, she rushed back into the house, quickly started her car, and drove straight to the beach. When she arrived there, Amanda called her parents and apologized for every mistake she had ever made. She also told them how much she loved them. The atmosphere felt unbelievably quiet because there was nobody else around, and the only light came from her car's headlights. Then the next morning, Amanda was mysteriously found dead on the beach with her right leg horribly broken, and whatever was chasing her had not stopped. This is It Follows. The story then shifts to a high school girl named Jay, who lives with her mother and younger sister Kelly. Their childhood friends Yara and Paul often spend time at the house together while watching old movies. One afternoon, Jay goes on a movie date with a guy named Hugh. While they are waiting for the film to start, Hugh suddenly panics and forces Jay to leave the theater because he notices a woman in yellow staring at him near the entrance.
How about the girl in the yellow dress?
Where?
Strangely, Jay cannot see anyone standing there at all. After leaving the cinema, they continue their date at a restaurant. But in the distance, a man dressed entirely in black can be seen watching them. The next morning, Jay tells Kelly about Hugh's strange behavior at the theater. Around that time, they also notice their neighbor Greg washing his car outside. Later during another date, Jay and Hugh spend time talking by the beach before eventually sleeping together in Hugh's car. But not long afterward, Jay is suddenly restrained and loses consciousness. When she wakes up, she finds herself tied to a wheelchair inside an abandoned building. Hugh then reveals the terrifying truth. For quite some time, he has been hunted by a mysterious entity capable of taking the form of anyone. Sometimes it appears as a stranger, someone familiar, or even a loved one. The curse is passed through intimacy, which means Hugh became targeted after sleeping with his previous girlfriend. And now the entity has started coming after Jay as well. Although the creature moves very slowly, it will never stop walking toward its target until it catches them and kills them in a horrifying way. Just like what happened to Amanda earlier in the story. Hugh warns Jay to never stay inside a place with only one exit because she could easily become trapped with nowhere to run. Now Jay can finally see the entity too, and Hugh desperately tells her that the only way to survive is to pass the curse to someone else through intimacy. Because if Jay dies, the entity will simply go back to hunting Hugh all over again. Not long afterward, the entity finally appears in front of Jay while taking the form of a naked woman slowly walking toward her with a completely empty expression. The atmosphere instantly becomes terrifying. Hugh quickly drives Jay back home, while Kelly and the others immediately contact the police. Since Jay still struggles to fully believe Hugh's story, she gives the police Hugh's identity and the address of the house where he had been staying. But when the officers investigate the place, they discover that Hugh had been using a fake name to rent the house, and by then, he has already disappeared. Later, while sitting in class at school, Jay suddenly notices an old woman outside the building, slowly walking straight toward her while staring directly at her the entire time. Strangely, nobody else even reacts to the woman, even though her appearance is clearly unsettling. This time, the entity has taken the form of an elderly woman, and Jay realizes she is the only person capable of seeing it. Terrified, Jay immediately leaves the classroom, but because the old woman keeps following her, Jay eventually runs away from school completely. She then heads to the coffee shop where Kelly and Paul work and tells them everything that just happened.
He passed it on to me. Something was gonna follow me.
That's all bullshit, Jamie.
Jay also explains Hugh's story about the curse and the entity that has now started hunting her. At this point, Jay slowly begins to believe that all of it is real. But Kelly still thinks Hugh simply made up the entire story because he only wanted to sleep with Jay in the first place. That night, Yara stays over at Jay's house while Paul sleeps on the couch to keep watch in case something dangerous happens. Since Jay cannot fall asleep, she joins Paul in the living room, and the two spend the night talking about old memories while watching classic movies together. It turns out Paul was Jay's very first kiss, and Jay was Paul's first kiss too. But suddenly, the kitchen window shatters after something is thrown at it. Paul quickly leaves to wake up Kelly and Yara, while Jay nervously heads toward the kitchen to investigate. And horrifyingly enough, completely terrified, Jay immediately escapes the house on her bicycle and rides to a nearby playground. The place is completely empty because it is already the middle of the night, making the entire situation feel even more disturbing. Not long afterward, Kelly and the others finally arrive at the playground. While crying, Jay begs Kelly not to tell their mother anything about what has been happening because she knows nobody would ever believe such a terrifying story. Jay also refuses to stay at home for the time being because she no longer feels safe there. Wanting to uncover the truth behind everything, Jay and her friends, including Greg, decide to investigate Hugh's house themselves. The place looks abandoned and run down, with almost every window covered in newspapers. While searching around the house, Paul discovers an old photo hidden inside a magazine. The picture shows Hugh together with his previous girlfriend, and Jay immediately recognizes the school jacket the girl is wearing. After that, they begin digging deeper into Hugh's background at his school and eventually discover that Hugh is not even his real name. His actual name is Jeff. Without wasting any time, the group heads straight to Jeff's house using the address provided by the school. But before leaving, the entity can briefly be seen already approaching their car. Once they arrive, Jeff finally explains how he became cursed in the first place. According to him, everything started after he slept with a random woman he met at a bar, someone whose name he cannot even remember anymore. Now Jeff is just as terrified as Jay because the only people capable of seeing the entity are the current target and the previous victim in the chain. If the creature succeeds in killing Jay, it will return to hunting Jeff again. And if Jeff dies, it will simply continue moving backward to the person before him. The curse keeps repeating endlessly, and the only known way to survive is by passing it to someone else through intimacy. Jeff apologizes to Jay for dragging her into this nightmare just to save himself. He even coldly admits that he chose her because he believed it would be easier for a woman to find another partner and pass the curse along. Before they leave, Jeff warns Jay once again to keep running from the entity because no matter what form it takes, the creature never stops walking toward its target. Afterward, the group decides to stay at Greg's father's beachside cabin. Since the place is located far away from the city, they assume the entity will take a long time to reach them there. For the first time in a while, Jay is finally able to sleep peacefully through the night. The next morning, Greg lets Jay practice shooting with a pistol, hoping it might help her defend herself against the entity if it ever appears again. But while everyone is relaxing by the beach and Greg briefly steps away, the entity suddenly arrives without anyone noticing and quietly walks straight toward Jay before grabbing her by the hair. Thankfully, Jay manages to escape and shoots the creature directly in the head. But horrifyingly, the attack does absolutely nothing. The entity simply keeps changing forms as it continues advancing toward her. At that moment, Kelly, Yara, and Paul finally realize the curse is real because they witness Jay's hair being violently pulled by something invisible. Paul even gets thrown backward after trying to attack the entity himself, leaving his stomach badly injured. Greg, however, still struggles to believe any of it because he never actually sees the creature. After the chaos, Jay is taken to the hospital with a broken right arm, but even after waking up safely in her hospital room, Jay remains completely terrified when she suddenly hears footsteps slowly approaching her from outside. Thankfully, it turns out to be nothing more than a nurse passing by. Not long afterward, Greg wakes up and notices that Jay is still overwhelmed with fear. Wanting to help her somehow, Greg offers to sleep with Jay so the curse can be passed on to him instead. Even though Greg still does not fully believe the curse is real, the decision at least helps calm Jay down because she believes that is the only way the entity can move to another target. Jay eventually accepts, hoping Greg will somehow be safe if the creature truly exists. Over the next few days, Jay and Greg begin growing closer to each other, while Paul quietly becomes jealous after learning that the two of them slept together. But after 3 full days pass, Greg still has not seen any sign of the entity. At that point, they begin wondering if maybe the creature was actually weakened after being shot, or perhaps it simply takes time before returning once the curse has been passed to a new victim. As Jay's condition improves, she is finally allowed to return home with her right arm still in a cast. Even so, she remains deeply paranoid and spends most of her time hiding inside the house while constantly watching her surroundings. Kelly, Yara, and Paul continue staying close to protect her, while Greg slowly becomes more convinced that the curse was never real at all because his life seems completely normal and nothing appears to be following him. But later that night, Jay suddenly notices what looks like Greg walking barefoot outside before smashing through the window of his own house and entering inside. Realizing something is horribly wrong, Jay immediately rushes over because she knows the figure she saw was most likely the entity pretending to be Greg. Unfortunately, by the time she arrives, the creature has already changed into the form of Greg's mother, and it brutally kills Greg before Jay's eyes. Completely terrified, Jay quickly runs away from the house. With Greg now dead, the curse immediately returns to Jay, meaning the entity has started hunting her once again. Desperate to stay alive, Jay spends the night alone deep in the woods, hoping the distance will buy her enough time before the creature eventually reaches her. Exhausted from fear and stress, she eventually falls asleep out there alone. The next morning, Jay returns home and barricades her bedroom door with a chair, terrified that the entity could appear at any moment. Soon after that, Paul arrives and offers to sleep with Jay, so the curse can be transferred to him instead. He cannot stand watching her live in constant fear anymore, but Jay refuses because she does not want to put Paul in danger too. Instead, Paul comes up with another plan. He decides they should try killing the entity once and for all at the swimming pool, where he and Jay shared their very first kiss. But just as they are about to leave, they suddenly notice a figure standing silently on the roof of Jay's house. Once they arrive at the swimming pool, the group begins preparing an electric trap for the entity. They plug in all kinds of household appliances, including lamps, irons, and even keyboards, planning to throw them into the water and electrocute the creature once it enters the pool. Meanwhile, Jay stays in the middle of the pool to act as bait and lure the entity toward her. After waiting for quite some time, Jay suddenly panics and starts screaming while pointing toward the direction of the approaching entity so her friends can track its position. This time, the creature has taken the form of Jay's father, but the entity is far more intelligent than they expected. Instead of stepping into the water, it begins throwing electrical appliances toward the pool from a distance. Thankfully, Jay manages to avoid getting hurt. Their entire plan quickly falls apart as the entity continues throwing objects at Jay until one of them strikes her directly in the head. Seeing the situation spiral out of control, Paul grabs the pistol and starts firing while Jay desperately guides him toward the creature's location. But because Paul cannot actually see the entity himself, he accidentally shoots Yara in the leg. Then Kelly comes up with a smart idea. She throws a cloth over the entity's body so everyone can finally see its outline clearly. Taking the opportunity, Paul shoots the creature in the head, causing it to collapse into the pool. But even then, the nightmare is not over. As Jay tries climbing out of the water, the entity still reaches out and attempts to drag her back down. Paul continues firing repeatedly into the pool until the water slowly fills with blood and the entity finally disappears from sight. Even after surviving the attack, Jay remains completely paranoid. Back at home, she still keeps her bedroom door barricaded with a chair because she remembers the entity surviving a gunshot to the head earlier at the beach. Fortunately, Yara survives as well, and the gunshot wound in her leg is eventually stitched up without any serious complications. As time passes, Jay still cannot escape her constant fear, and Paul once again offers to sleep with her so the curse can move on to him instead. This time, Jay finally accepts. After secretly loving Jay for so long, Paul finally gets the chance to be with the girl he has always cared about. And from that moment on, the two officially begin dating. But in the following days, Paul slowly starts becoming afraid himself. Eventually, he decides to sleep with prostitutes in hopes of passing the curse on to someone else and freeing himself from the nightmare. Afterward, Paul feels relieved and later visits Yara together with Jay. However, one day while Paul and Jay are walking hand in hand together, a distant figure can be seen slowly following behind them. So the moral of the story is never trust a slow walker, because somehow they always have unlimited stamina and the entire map unlocked.